It is time to expose Genesis for what it really is. I want to show how it's built on a structure, myths. I can see it. It's hard to show, but I'm going to be working on it starting in this video. The implications to me are staggering. This is Abrahamic religion. What emerges from Abrahamic religion? Judaism, Christianity, Islam are founded on monomyths. The carrier shell is supernatural. Okay, let's take a look at it. My name is Dan Paulson and welcome everybody to the video. I've been working on this a bit and I've got quite a few videos up working up to this. And I've been standing back taking a look at what I have going on here and I'm ready to kind of jump in, but I have to figure out how I'm going to do this. At the same time, I'm still figuring out what is there. It's very deep, it's complicated. However, there's something patterned going on in there that is held in analogous verbiage that I have found a way to work with and interpret in a way that I get consistency across the board in all of the stories as far as finding monomyths. But I want to show how that works. The first thing I have to do, though, is discuss how we're going to interpret the verses. This is incredibly important, and it has to be done this way. What I'm going to suggest is that I am going to lay out a process. And the reason I'm laying out this process is because I have worked out in my mind over and over again, and I can find no other way of making it work than what I'm going to lay out right here. Genesis is about me. It is about my life, when I'm born, and how I live my life. That is what is at the core template level. Then that is built on a story that becomes a scaffolding, a framework for the story. I'm born, I experience life, and yeah, we'll get into that as I get into the interpretation. That essentially becomes the steps of the template along the way. How I came about, how I look inward to heal myself inwardly. Not through supernatural waiting until life is over with, but now how to heal myself. The supernatural carrier case is for the people who are not going to do that, who are going to wait until they die to take care of things. So if you're interested in taking care of things now and not waiting till you die, that is what is in here. That's what I went after. Okay. So every story in here then is an analogous story. What that means is that it is the nouns and the verbs that are being used are not what they actually sound like. Everything is a play on words. Now, that means when I go to interpret, everything that I read there, even if it sounds like it's really from their culture, doesn't matter. It's still an analog. If I read, for example, about Pharaoh and Abram giving his wife Sarai to Pharaoh, I'm not going to read that story as if it's factual. And I'm not going to read those people as if they are factual. What I'm going to read it as is Pharaoh is, there was a Pharaoh in Egypt at that time. So it looks like, why would you interpret that? That's about Pharaoh. They're using Pharaoh as an analogous term as this is something that is bad that happens. So Pharaoh doesn't mean Pharaoh. Pharaoh means something that happens that is bad. I am my consciousness. I am Abram. And my inner being, Sarai, is the one that's going to become corrupted. That is how this is going to work. At no point in time will I deviate from that. I'm not going to go into Sodom and Gomorrah and say, this is suddenly true. And this pillar of salt is really, none of that is, all of those things are analogous terms that are holding something different. They're put in a story format in the culture of people that are telling stories at that time. They don't have books. They don't have media. They're walking and talking and thinking for their lifetimes, for thousands upon thousands of years. No books, no reading, no writing, no media. They're talking. These stories are huge. I've seen people give more time to comic books. Yeah, seriously, this is deep stuff that we're not, what we're looking at is the carrier shell. That's all the religions. That's what people are looking at. When we get to the deeper level, we've got something else going on, and it's going to take some thinking and some working at this. At any rate, when it comes time to interpret, then everything that is in the story is going to become an analogous term. Nothing deviates from that. We all use that same process. When people don't do that, we become we begin to develop inconsistencies in the teaching. People don't even agree on what it means because they're not using a set of rules, and they're trying to figure out how it really happened in real life instead of saying, wait a minute, that's just a story carrying the template. Strip off the story and let's find out what the template is. That's what this is going to be about right here. What is that template? And we're going to work through the stories in a way that is going to sound very bizarre. But this is how it's if we do this, it's going to very consistently extract a template that we can pull from Greek myth, from Hinduism, from other places as well. Somewhere in the background, there are people that know there is one reality. They also knew that in humanity, people would not go for that they're going to stay tribal. And you put that reality, nesting it in all of their various myths and religions, and let it be there all the time without people even realizing it's there. We just turn inward to find it. I'm going to make some mental correlations. Imagine you had a book of Aesop's fables and you knew that there was an interpretation process, and you can go through each one of them one by one and interpret them, knowing at all points in time that none of the stories are true. They're fables. These are the same thing, except that they are done in a different genre, and they're not about life conditions necessarily, but they're about the human condition that we're going to get to. They're more specific, but they're like that. They're going to be, everything that is there is meant to be figured out. Everything. And we're going to do a better job than Aesop's fables. What do we know about the tortoise and the hare? If you think about that, you go, well, we already know that it's slow and steady that wins the race. That's what the author told us. What if they didn't put that there? Why would it be slow and steady that wins the race? I could look at that as a kid, and I remember hearing that as a kid and hearing slow and steady wins the race. But before I heard that, my mind is already thinking, and I instantly think, why is that the case? The rabbit was ahead. Why wouldn't the moral of the story be when you're ahead, don't stop? You know, when you think it through, you find ways of finding errors and flaws in it. We're going to do that to this material right here. And then, yes, we're going to make ourselves component parts of the story. In all of this material, that's how it works. If there's an anchored ship that cannot sail, I am the ship, and I cannot sail because I'm hanging on to something. Now, this is fun. If I was using a Buddha verse or a Lao Tzu verse or anything else, I would use the exact same process, that it becomes something that plays out in my psyche. It's going to be on the sequence steps, but the analogs are going to be different, so it's going to sound different. Here, right from Buddha in the beginning, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. Now, when I finish interpreting that, what I find out is that it's all mental, that the experience that I'm having has to do with my mind, my perceptions. The thinking an evil thought, that is analogous. Okay, remember, all of these are going to be treated like analogs. So that isn't about me thinking an evil thought. I could have bad things happen to me and have a horrific life despite the fact that I've not been evil. I didn't do that. I was a victim. I got raped. I got molested. I got this. I got all kinds of things. So you might dismiss yourself from this teaching going, yeah, that doesn't apply to me. I didn't think with an evil thought. When the reality of it is, again, evil thought is a judgment. It is classifying something in life. It is starting out as a child and not having any perceptive wiring to how your emotional state is. And then having life experiences happen, and as a result, we begin to hold things in our mind that are hurt, that are pain, that are shame, that are judgments, that become a part of who and what we are going to be. That is going to be kind of some core stuff in us. So this applies to everybody, the evil, the hurt stuff, this right here, and the wheel coming around, the foot of the ox. I become this entire story right here. If I'm working it through, if a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, that means my consciousness, this is not man, this is every human being. If a human being has ever had a bad experience that is not resolved, then pain follows them as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. I am the ox drawing the carriage. I am pulling my life along with me, but the wheel has that pain coming around and around, so there's a cyclical pain following me. By extension, let's do the same thing with some Jesus material. Judge not, lest ye be judged, for the judgment with which you judge others will be judged unto you. Words to that effect, meted unto you, that sort of a thing. Judge not means, Again, this is an analogous term. In the physical world, you could say, I'm not supposed to judge things, but how do you do that? There are things you have to judge. What if you see a child getting hurt? You have to judge things. It doesn't work in the physical world. The only way it works and makes sense is if you put it up in the psyche. And what it has to do with what we're holding on to. We have judged something. I hate that, and I'm going to continue hating that for all of my life. The problem with that is that hate becomes a part of you and it continues to cycle. I'm ashamed of that. I hate them. I hate this. I hate whatever we create there continues to be a part of our life and it emerges from us. That is judging. Judge not, lest you be judged. For the judgment with which you judge others. So the way you feel about pain, shame, hurt, this isn't about the physical world again. This is about, I hate that person back there because they did this to me. That is going to continue to happen in you. The judgment with which you judge into others will be likewise, meted back to you. You are holding the very energy that you don't like up here, and that causes us to have continual experiences as it gets triggered, and the only way to get rid of it is this. Buddha and Jesus just taught the same thing. And that is so consistent. I'm going to grab some Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching, Chinese. It's different material altogether. Taoists, Buddhists, Christians, Jews are all different people. But you know what? When you turn it inward, they all have a core teaching that is the same. This is right on the first one. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Naming is the origin of all particular things. That is how our mind works. When we're young, we're little, we haven't named anything, we have not classified, we haven't judged them, we haven't had an evil thought. We have not named them. We have not had a life experience that tells us, I like this, I don't like that. And of course, naming some things are good. We're going to grow and develop. We are going to name things. That means we're having life experiences. However, life experiences can be beneficial or derogatory to us. The emotion, how do they make us feel? Free from desire, you realize the mystery. So free from desire is an analog. Free from desire, from what you're clinging onto, you realize the mystery of life. You flow free. You're not hung up on anything. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Caught in hanging on to something, you see the manifestation of it. You see the manifestation of what you're caught on. Okay, so Lao Tzu just taught the same thing, that what we have named is what creates it. Free from it, life is fine, but if we're caught in it, we see the repetitive cycle of it come over and over again. That's how we find out how they work. They turn here. They go here. In the mind, and then the analogs have to shift. Genesis, same thing, except instead of short verse, they just add in a lot of layers. The human exists in a mental hierarchy, a higher being, a consciousness, our subconscious, which we hold everything in, the pain, the things that that manifest from us, offspring in this case, something that is held inside of us, slaves or animals or something that is somehow held in a way that represents a part of us. So what I'm going to suggest is that as we go through these stories and we play them out and we continue to find that the stories are structured on the same hierarchy that the human existences and through the same sequences. That is something that's just going to have to emerge as we go along, though. That is how I'm going to interpret all of the verses. The Jewish material, Roman material, everybody gets the exact same treatment. Jesus material, they turn inward. It's just the analogs that are different. But it's understanding that is what they're doing and then realizing, what do you interpret? When it sounds plain language, interpret it. If it says, to fast this to the world, that doesn't mean, don't go out and have dinner or stay at home and, skip a meal for today while you're thinking about somebody. It could be that. But fasting in the spiritual world means shutting off from. We get wired to the things that we're constantly seeing. So when you see even something like fasting, you might think, oh, that doesn't mean anything spiritual. It does. It absolutely does. This is important because when we're clothed, it's going to be the same thing. We like to think that it's good to have clothing on in public, when in some of the teachings, they talk about nudity, being naked, unashamed in the garden. You're not covered up with anything. In the spiritual world, that means we are not covered We're not hiding ourselves behind shame or something like that. Lies, deceit. I don't want to tell anybody. It's too painful. It's too whatever. We hold things inside of us. Those things provide turmoil. In Abrahamic material, yeah, we will see clothing or nakedness as a part of it from time to time. Later, that is going to morph into clean or dirty robes. Yeah, having linen white robes or not, which represents, having something covering yourself. Again, not physical. There's a physical component to this. Even people that say, that fasting is a spiritual thing. We do it all day. We spend time together. We do. There are actions that humans get together and take where it is beneficial. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the very core level, there is something that means let go of the things you're hanging on to. If we want to emerge above life, we must let go of the things that we hang on to. That's it. This is the path to get there. This is how to elevate and rise above the physical. Okay, before I get into the interpretation, I want to suggest that there's a couple of layers going on here that I see. And what I'm going to do is start off this time just taking the basic layer. There's core steps along the way. There are other things that in the Jewish material they're doing to create a story network and to I'm going to suggest that as we're moving along, each time there's another called person, this is starting the monomyth over and over again in a new adventure. They sound different. They really sound different. But we're going to look for those patterns and see how they're not how they're not different. But there's some fun things going on in the Jewish material with repetitions of words and things like that turn out to be keys that bring us to other places, how they're blending words and mixing up the analogs, how they're creating, you can't just be naked all the time. If somebody's naked all the time, that would be, why is this happening? So you do the robes thing, you do some other ways of trying to show covered or uncovered. As the stories go on, the more analogs you can use that contain the same step, the more you can make the stories sound radically different from each other to the person that can't read them conceptually, that doesn't understand that these are actually not real component parts, that these stories here are actually containing something in there, like that fable, except that we're going to use this process consistently, and everybody will use the same process. Again, no supernatural. What I'm going to do here, though, is just stick with a basic core level and not really get into the depths of things. However, at some point, we do have to look at some of where they are matching numbers and names to create places on the template that they're returning to. You might read a date, on such and such a month, on the 7th month, on the 3rd, and those mean something. Those numbers mean something. When they're saying things like, so-and-so was alive for this amount of time, then they had this child, then they lived for this much longer, and then they died. All of those are coding something in there. And I don't know what they are yet, but I would say that I am very certain as I move ahead that we would find that probably every number that is used in the Bible has an analogous, that it represents something very specific. And that as we go through, what we're going to do is start spotting these where they appear and match them up. We'll put them in add them all together. What we'll do is be able to analyze what they're doing. And, so that'll happen as we move along and get thicker into it. Understanding that somebody at some point in time worked all this into it, and it's very deep, and we're trying to crawl our way back into it. Imagine that you have a sequence of steps along the human life that you know that these are consistent. Everybody comes about in the same way. And you take that set of steps and take it to your own culture and create some story that holds that in any way you want to. And it's there. On the ones here between Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu, how it showed that that we classified something, we named it, and then by judging it, having that life experience, and then as a result of that life experience, we've got some sort of a cyclical pain that comes after us. Now, in the Bible, we're going to find that exact same sequence, except that it's called first sin. What we've got here in a lot larger of a story where it's beginning to it is actually using the component parts, the conscious and the subconscious, the male, the female. So we are naked, unashamed in the garden. This represents a time in our life before we begin to attach to the world. We're happy kids. But the serpent in the story tempts Eve, which represents, what is a serpent? Something tied to the ground, something that cannot fly, cannot walk, it cannot elevate above the earth. The temptation of earth goes to us, and we, as a result, we begin to partake of the knowledge of, we're judging. We're beginning to classify life at this point. First sin is an analog. Yeah, first sin, that's silly, but it makes sense on the template. First sin represents that point where we are now naming things. We are now judging things. We are now classifying things. And as a result, we get sent out of the Garden of Eden. We lose our happiness. And there's a punishment. The female, our inner being, is now going to have painful childbirth, getting worse as time goes on. There's our cyclical pain emerging from the inner being. And Adam is told, you're going to be working the sweat of the land. You are now going to be living life tied to the physical. We're not ready to elevate above that yet. So we see in a different story type of way, once we analyze it, it comes down to the same teaching. And okay, so as I get into the analysis of Genesis, that is exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'll make this video a standalone video because it's kind of an introduction, because it got a little bit longer, and I think that it's important to have this. When I get into the interpretation of the verses itself, I don't want to keep doing this over and over again. It just gets too drawn out. It is a drawn out process. It is not simple. If it were, we'd have found this long ago. I'm still looking for it, and there's others that are looking for this too. We're all struggling to find our way into what they're doing by just analyzing what they have going on. There's nothing magic here. There's nobody being granted anything special. We're using brain power to try and analyze the puzzle and interact with it, and realizing that there are interactive self-healing steps in here. Okay, any questions or comments? Feel free to put them below. I'll start with a sequence. I won't get into a great deal of interpretation of the verses themselves. I'm just going to pull out a few things. We're born from here. Here is, it's important for us to have cause and effect. It's important for us to have cycles. Here's where we're pure and things are empty. Here's where it goes bad. This is what happens as a result. And I'll create those steps. Then I will turn them back into sort of analogous terms, though, because I think having them as really interactive mental steps, it's harder to see them. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'll see as I move along. There's a point in time when we're in the Garden of Eden, we're naked, unashamed, we're not full of things. There's a point in time later on where Noah is naked, has got himself buzzed on wine, and he's in his tent. And that's going to be actually the same location. There's a point where God takes, the next step, what do we have? Tower of Babel starts right off in the beginning where everybody is one voice. There it is again. Then we move on to the next story, Sarai and Abram. And it starts out with them being in the land where God wants them to be, but there's a famine there. And all of that sounds like a bad thing, isn't it? But that is an emptiness. So what I need to do, you look at those and go, how do you show that those are all the same? It's like there's an emptiness that starts out there. First you don't have anything accumulated. You're naked. Your fasting is to the world. All of those elements begin to emerge once you play them in the mind and realize what they're doing. And the analogs, they're holding the story for the story culture. We're extracting the template from the story. When we do that, we begin to see different things. We can't be part of the story. We have to understand that template is what is in there, and we're always after that template. We know that now. We don't have to wander all over the place trying to figure it out. There is a template that we can extract with consistency. Okay. And I don't know how well this fits here, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in. I've got some classic mythology with some Greek stuff here. Do you know the story of Prometheus? Prometheus was a second generation, kind of the Titan lineage there. There's a point though where, just to make it brief, humans were primitive, and Prometheus stole fire from Zeus and gave it to the humans. He was actually helping humans advance from a primitive state. However, he was punished as a result. Zeus actually like chained him or pinned him to a cliff wall, and a eagle would eat out his liver every day, and then it would grow back. The liver the Greeks thought was the seat of emotion. So we have this idea of that. It's a weird story, but you know what that is? If you play it out in the psyche again, that is first sin. It sounds so differently, but when we play it out in the psyche, it's the same thing. Primitive humanity, that is, all of this is us. Primitive humanity equates to the same thing as day 7 in the Garden of Eden. We are innocent. We have not partaken of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or we have not been given fire. Both of those represent the same thing. Prometheus represents the same thing as the serpent. However, it's held in such a way that it depends on whose side of the story you're on. It could be your bad characteristics telling the story, going, yeah, we got free. Now we can live and do whatever we want to. But what happens is those people end up protesting in the streets. They ended up not getting out of the first sin, and life continued to get bad. It takes a while to unwrap all of that. But right here in Greek myth, we're seeing the same. And it's a big network of stories, so I don't want to get into that, and I don't know it very well. But that is how the stories unravel. And then when you see them unravel like that, it's like, oh my gosh, seriously. Yeah, seriously, that's what they're doing. All right. Well, okay, so next video, I'm going to just start right into Genesis then. I'm going to end this one, and I'll leave it as an introduction. People come in later and want to know what the heck are you doing here? Just send them. I'll send them back to this one. And okay, that should do it for this one. I can't think of anything else. Everything is analogous, every bit of it. Even if it sounds like it's historical, it was written at their time, it's going to, but we still treat it analogous. In order to maintain consistency with interpretation, if you have to interpret one thing, then interpret it all. Period. Unless you know something different. But in this case, we don't know. It's old. So we interpret it all, and suddenly it makes a lot more sense once we realize Pharaoh means first sin. Yeah, you're having life experiences. That's what that analog is holding. It'll fit right on the template and continually teach us what we have to do to fix our lives, to detach from that physical that we don't want to be a part of. I say that, I claim that, we'll just get into it. I know there's a few people watching and kind of waiting for me to get into this, and I've been I'm looking at it kind of daunted by it. It's honestly, it's a big thing. And the numbers have had me kind of befuddled, and they still do. I think I see some of what they're doing, but not all of it. But they have a technique of repeating a word a certain amount of times. You know, if they say 7 in a sentence 3 times in a row and it sounds weird, then that means 7 and 3 right there. They're doing things like that with the numbering in its simplest form. There's other stuff going on, though. You know, when it's time to get the circumcision, when you do that day 8, that's the day after day 7. That's after you need, and circumcision is not the physical thing. This is stripping off of you what you have put on. So they're all over the place with analogous verbiage, living a life while still maintaining this template right there. Who did that? Who's got the magic in the background? Maybe it was just a common thing, but let's find it. Let's figure out what's there. If it's in everything, that's what we're supposed to find. Yeah, that's what we're supposed to find. We got consistency there. Okay, that'll end it for this video, I think. I just wanted to kind of cover how it's going to work, why it works. And then when I get into the next video, I'll just start right into, here's Genesis, and here's each section. You know, each section from Genesis is a sequence on the template. We'll just identify what that is. It ends up being pretty simple once you find it and see it. Okay. Look for the Genesis video then. Love one another. I'll see you then.